This is a response video to a user by the name of Forced Adversity, who's talking about how comics have always been political. And as a stroke of fortune, just when I was thinking of how I could cover this topic in video, someone tagged me on the Bird app to this very video. So I get to do a good old-fashioned response video and cover a topic that I was gonna make a video on from scratch. So thanks to Forced Adversity for giving me the opportunity to dive in much deeper than I would have on my own. Couldn't have done it without you, guy. Stay classy. But yeah, let's get it. Let's go.
Welcome to Actual Context, where we expose the anti-SJW grifters for the irrational, lying bigots that they are. Oh man, are they mad at me about it.
Wrong, sir. Wrong.
Already done. Grifter is the new term that people love to sling at other folks whenever they think they're holding a wrong opinion. Because there's this weird idea among various slivers of the internets that if a person agrees with something that is quote-unquote right-wing or quote-unquote conservative, and those quotes, I need y'all to understand how big these air quotes are. Like, imagine the size of the sun and then triple it. That's how big these air quotes are. But the assumption is anyone that agrees with points that could be deemed as conservative or right-wing, they're only doing so because they want clicks or views or attention or money, aka a shyster, a huckster, a grifter. Like, there's no way that you could actually believe this stuff. And this is doubly so if you belong to a marginalized community. So I've been called the grifter. A lot of my friends, associates, mutuals on social media have been called grifters. All your favorites: Eric July, Gothics, Ruin Leon, Just Some Guy. They're all black. And they're always called grifters. Anyone who's LGBT and don't agree with every single point that comes out of the far left, you are a grifter. So Blair Wright, Ariel Scarcella, grifter. Rosa Dawn, oh, she be grifting, y'all. We're all just a bunch of grifters. We all just say this shit so that we can get clicks and likes and views and get that sweet anti-SJW ad revenue. Please. But let me calm down because we haven't even got to 30 seconds in, so let's continue.
If you're subscribed to the channel, there's a 60% chance it's because of the Watchmen video. I appreciate you subscribing and giving me a chance, and I hope you'll check out some of my other content like Bread Time Stories or some of the other short form essays about objectivity in film criticism or fake news.
Oh, look, fake news. Kind of like fake-ass nerd news. Kind of like the idea that Marvel/comic characters have always been explicitly left-wing in the way that people are left-wing today. Yeah, that's some fake-ass nerd news if I ever heard it.
But since that Watchmen video, which also covered the anti-SJW mentality, I've gotten a pretty hefty amount of feedback, which I consider a compliment whether it's negative or positive feedback. One comment I got the other day was that I'm deleting all the negative comments, and that's just inaccurate for a couple of easily proven reasons. There are several comments where someone disagreed with my take on the show, or even how I interpreted the original graphic novel. Those comments are still there. There's a couple where someone tried to defend anti-SJWs and say forced diversity is a real problem. Those are still there.
Aha! Oh God! Oh, he said the word. It's killing me. He said the phrase. Oh God! Oh, the cringe! It hit me in the throat. Oh, the cringe! It hit me in the throat. Whew. Okay. I'm ready now. Let's get it. Let's go.
Marvel was called The World Outside Your Window by the original creators, and was meant to have relatable people who happen to become superheroes. Stories that can exist within our world in real cities. Well, New York City mostly, but with characters representing contemporary styles and cultures and attitudes. This also includes politics. If you don't believe me, Go check out Scott at NerdSync's video on Captain America and the Politics of Comics for just a maddeningly fantastic video about the history of this. If Cap punching Hitler on his first issue's cover isn't political, I'll eat my helmet.
He just did the thing that people often do when making the refutation that comics have always been political in response to an anti-SJW or anti-far left point or person. They usually go right to Captain America's first issue where he's decking old Uncle Adolf right in the kisser. Now, they're not wrong. They're not wrong at all. This is clear political stuff. However, they're leaving out a fundamental difference between Cap knocking out Hitler and making every other villain in comic books Donald Trump. Whether that's directly just making him a villain, like when MODOK was Donald Trump, or having characters who are clear analogs or references to Donald Trump. And this isn't just exclusive to comics. All my Doctor Who people, y'all remember that episode where they had the not Donald Trump character who was just a blowhard, loudmouth American who loved guns and was clearly Donald Trump? How about in Animaniacs when there was an orange Cyclops, clearly was Donald Trump? There's that shit, and then there's literal war propaganda that's put out during an active war by having a superhero whose costume is the American flag knock out the head honcho of the bad guys. I'm sure there were plenty ads for war bonds and stuff in there too, as was endemic of all media back then, because it was propaganda. It was here to stir the soul and boil the blood against the Nazis and the Italian fascists and the imperialistic Japanese. That was the whole point of it. So yes, it was political. It was literally the most political something could get. And guess what? That's not a good thing. The only reason why we accept it for what it was is because we were at war. If something like that came out today, people would flip their shit. Which honestly is exactly why so many people are against the overt, heavy-handed politicism of modern-day mainstream comics. I am all here for political or social themes. The problem is, we're not getting that. We're getting less and less and less good old-fashioned adventure and action stories and more heavy-handed propaganda level stories and messages in the media. These are things that exist purely for the message. Say there's a comic that centers on the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, a genuinely told story might use the Black Lives Matter movement as a sort of backdrop. And within that, you can have people who are pro-BLM, anti-BLM, somewhere in the middle, totally neutral. You could have a black character who thinks BLM is a bunch of bullshit. You could have a white character who is all BLM everything. You could have either, both, or neither. That's what it means to tell a genuine story. If you're going to focus on a real world topic, you need to do so sincerely. You can't just paint all the people who you want to look at as bad as evil. But unfortunately, that's exactly what keeps happening. This scenario I'm proposing isn't just a hypothetical. It's what happened in the book Nubia Real One, a YA novel by L.L. McKinney that came out earlier this year that took the Wonder Woman character of Nubia, reimagined her as a black teenage girl. It's obviously BLM the comic, because all the white people are unrealistically evil. Most of the black people are either victims or heroes. In the case of most of the men or boys, they're pretty much victims. And in the case of the girls and women, they're all super strong, super capable, care about everything, want everything to be done the right way, are heroic, selfless, brave, all that good stuff. So a story like that, where people are not characterized based on who they are as individuals, but what group or identity group they belong to, that is not a real story. That is the exact over politicization that people are tired of, because these are not genuinely told stories. They're modern day propaganda, and we're sick of it.
If you Google Stan Lee's soapbox, you can find a lot of old scans from Silver Age Marvel Comics where Stan would address his foundational beliefs in tolerance and using contemporary socio-political themes.
Now, here we go. We have another tried and true method here of folks on the pro-far left side of the argument. It involves evoking the past words of the late, great Stan Lee. Usually something where he's going on some rant or some clipping from a magazine or comic where he's talking about how being prejudiced and racism and bigotry are bad. Talking about how people who hate blindly, fanatically, indiscriminately, if his hang-up is black men, he hates all black men, for example. If a redhead once offended him, he hates all redheads. Now, that last line right there is hilarious because we already know how people feel about redheads today. They are the most disposable ass group in existence because they are constantly getting race swapped, usually to being black. So, very ironic. But no, he is right here that people who hate people blindly and fanatically, yeah, that's not good. You know why? Because Stan Lee was actually the GOAT when it came to, like, acceptance and tolerance. Now, here's the gotcha. When Stan Lee and people like Stan Lee were talking about discrimination back then, if you notice here, he says if someone hates black men, he hates all black men. And then he follows that up by having the same standard applied to redheads. So he's not simply saying racism bad unless it's at white people, then it's fine because you can't be racist people. He's saying bigotry is bad. Being prejudiced is bad. Hating entire groups of people because one member of that group did you wrong one time. That's bad. And he is correct. And therein lies the difference between someone who is genuinely progressive and the way progressivism usually plays out today. For the very loud and vocal members of the community that have become sort of the staple or the spokespeople for the progressive movement, they do not hold these standards. They think that being racist against black people is akin to slaughtering newborn puppies. But a person can literally get on camera and say something akin to,
blood is on
I hope
your
they kill
hands.
all the white babies. Kill them all right now. Kill them. Kill your grandkids. Kill yourself. Coffin, bitch. Go lay in the coffin.
Ask you this, do you really believe that white lives don't matter?
Of course, I'm not a liar like you. You just lied on me on live TV. Is this really live?
This is live TV.
Live
Philadelphia right
TV,
there.
Black
big
Power.
opportunity.
Black Power, white
what?
lives do not matter.
You told me
White lives don't
you told
matter.
me-
that's just a reasonable expression of rage after having lived under a racist, oppressive system. A trans person can get on social media and talk about wanting to bash cis people's heads in with a baseball bat. That's fine. But if anyone, cis or trans, dare suggest that maybe every single thing that comes out from the far left about trans people may not necessarily be 100% correct. That person is a bigot. They're a transphobe. They want all trans people to die. We have to take them down. We have to cancel them. We have to make them poor and destitute, okay? We have to harass them until they want to kill themselves. And then even after they die, we're still going to talk shit about them because fuck them forever. Now, if it sounds like I'm taking crazy pills here and talking out my ass, it's because the people who say this stuff are just that far gone. And if it were just some small, tiny little powerless corner of the internet, I wouldn't even be making this video. The problem I have is that not only do these people absolutely dominate discourse of culture and fandoms and nerd shit, but they're also in the industries, which is why we get so many characters and storylines that focus this stuff. We get characters who would never be this radical, this extreme, turned into full-blown bigots. We have stories like Black Panther and the Crew, where everyone from Storm to Misty Knight to Black Panther himself, they're all full-blown racists. They're anti-white racists. We have stories like the one I just mentioned before, Nubia Real One. Why would Nubia, an Amazon, Someone from Themyscira, why would she be all gung-ho about Black Lives Matter, whitey bad? So forget how she's been up to this point. Forget everything. We're just going to write her as that. They even got to Static, y'all. They got to Static. They gave Static's comic the BLM makeover. And don't get it twisted, my LGBT friends and friendos. The folks who are quote-unquote queer and brown, like Vita Ayala, they are not off the hook at all. Because every single time a character who is not straight or not cis comes up, we get this entire spiel about how terrible and hard it is to be an LGBT person, or every time they're on panel, they just have to be talking about how they're gay. We have characters like Batwoman, where every other episode, if she ain't talking about being black, she talking about being a lesbian. That is what we get. We don't get people who say things like, don't be prejudiced, treat people fairly, everyone is equal. We don't get that from the mainstream, not anymore. We get, it's okay to hate on these groups, but these groups over here, you can't touch them. You can never say anything even remotely bad about them, or even question the things they say, and if you do, you're an istophobe who deserves to have your life and legacy destroyed.
These concepts are in the very fabric of Marvel heroes and stories. So if you're against politics and social consciousness in Marvel Comics, you're against Stan the Man. And in my opinion, that makes you a big old piece of shit.
Wrong, sir. Wrong.
No, because we're not against those things being in comics. We're against those things being all that comics are. And we're against those things being used to hate people, to completely vilify entire groups of people, while they're also espousing acceptance for their own group. How many feminist-themed, or re-themed, I should say, heroes have we seen in the past few years who go on big old screeds about how men suck, and men ain't shit, and fucking men, am I right?
But objectively, it means you have no idea what you're talking about when you say Marvel shouldn't have politics or themes of race in them.
Oh yeah, having no idea what you're talking about. You mean how you just referenced Stan Lee's statement from probably the 60s or the 70s and brought up Captain Marvel punching out Hitler during World War II as if that's relevant to modern day politics? This idea that comics have quote-unquote always been political is such a head-ass statement. Not because it's untrue at face value, because yes, there have always been political messages or themes or moments in comic books, and they tend to skew roughly left-wing, or at least left of center. The problem is, that's not what people mean when they say they're tired of politics in comics. They're tired of the propaganda. They're tired of the heavy-handed stories that exist just to say stuff like Black Lives Matter, or white people be racist, or ACAB, or this, that, and the third, or blah-de-blah-de-blah, or whoop-de-whoop-de-woo.
Even as recently as the mid-2000s, before the fake SJW menace.
Yeah, the fake SJW menace. The menace that's so fake that Marvel is currently run by people who call entire groups of folks racists, all the istophobes, simply because they asked, can y'all please stop ruining the characters who we've loved for all these decades? Yeah, but it's fake. Yeah, sure. Got it.
Marvel stories like Civil War were thinly veiled allegories for the debate around the Patriot Act and the idea of trading our liberty for our safety. Pretty soon after that, the Dark Reign line explored the idea of unreasonable warmongers being in charge of our nation's national defense policy.
Yeah, you see, that's what you call a theme, friendo. A theme is when you take a larger point and weave it into the story. You don't necessarily have to say it explicitly. Or, if you do, you can have it be reflected in the narrative itself, in its actions. You don't have to have multiple panels of characters making church sermon level discussions and diatribes about this stuff, okay? You don't have to sit down and stop and just pause the action, pause everything, and just say, hey, person, and by extension, reader, racism is bad. Like, Thanks for the observation. Such striking political observation. Such biting social commentary. It's not good to think negative things about people based on the color of their skin. Perish the thought! Are we almost done yet? My head hurts.
Maybe it is more prominent these days and less vague in its approach, but at the same time, our culture is more politically and socially aware than it has been since the 60s or 70s.
Citation needed, big boy, please. Because what you may call socially and politically aware, I call having your head up your ass. Because let's be honest here, the folks that we are discussing in this video, the quote-unquote SJWs, most of them have no idea what they're talking about with any of the subjects they discuss. And I say discuss with air quotes because usually it's just a diatribe. That's why they turn the comments off on their videos. That's why they turn the replies off on Twitter, because they're not interested in discussing things. They just want to shout their opinions at you and give you no opportunity to even respond. So, no, I don't believe that people are more politically aware. I believe that people think they're more politically and socially aware, but because they live in an echo chamber, never interact earnestly with people who believe differently than them, and actively dissuade discussion or even doing research, not just saying Google it, because of all that stuff, no, they're not. They're not more aware. Because when someone actually is aware, tries to have a talk with them, they shut down. I know this because this happens to me a lot, okay? Now, I'm not saying I'm like some super philosopher level of aware, but I do know a couple things about a couple things. I also like engaging with people who have opposing viewpoints. Not just to troll, not just to quote-unquote dunk on chuds. I just like talking with people who I'm on a different side of, and I just like figuring out how they think, seeing where they're coming from. I can gain perspective. It's great, Try it sometime. But what do? They either get with the name calling, say that I'm lying, call me a racist, call me anti-black, even though I am black, call me a self-hating Negro, or like the one lady said a while ago, called Gothics a token conservative darky. That's a good one. They start with lumping everyone in to some group saying, y'all do this, y'all do that, I'm on to y'all's tricks, when all I'm asking for is a basic explanation of what they said. So how can you be more politically aware when you can't even have a simple conversation with someone on the quote-unquote other side on Twitter without completely falling into ad hominem and lies and fallacy on fallacy on fallacy? Make it make sense.
And with social media and the internet, it's probably more aware than it ever has been. It would be against the very nature of Marvel to pretend otherwise. One thing I touched on in the Watchmen video but didn't really go into too deeply is the concept of a legacy character. Watchmen, of course, is a DC book, but I felt the need to provide some context around the industry in general and this sub-industry of anti-SJWs who have been making a living on pretending that comic books should be something else than what they are.
The only thing people want comics to be is fun. They want them to be fun, exciting, engaging, something worth investing into emotionally. We can't do that if the characters keep getting turned into freaking bullhorns for far leftism.
But I didn't need to dive too deeply into the Marvel-specific complaints. A pretty common argument that I've seen, and I feel like it's designed to avoid accusations of bigotry, or maybe it's to prevent the person from realizing that their opinions are bigoted, is that characters like Riri Williams and Kamala Khan are bad because they just took an existing character and made a new minority version, which sounds plausible on the surface, but I can't imagine how many people have latched onto this without the proper context to see it for the bullshit that it is.
If you're subscribed to my channel, you already know how I feel about race swaps, palette swaps, even when it comes to legacy characters, but I'll just restate it here. I generally don't like it. I don't think that it's always bad. I mean, you definitely can have different versions of a character that aren't the same exact identity as the original character. You can have a palette swap who can be very well done. But the way it's usually done now, it's not. Okay? Riri Williams was created by Brian Michael Bendis so that Iron Man could be a little black girl. Not unlike the way he made Miles Morales so that Spider-Man could be black and Latino. And it's always for the same reason, so that kids can quote unquote see themselves in these characters. I'm sorry, but as a former children who used to idolize Spider-Man and Nightcrawler, even though said children was neither a white boy from Queens nor a blue elf-looking mofo from Germany, why do you have to see every aspect of yourself in a character to like them? Now, obviously, it's good to have those because that reflects the world we live in. But the way these new characters are usually done these days, it's usually either very lazy or a very blatant attempt to try and cash in on the quote-unquote diversity craze of the current era. And beyond that, there's nothing. There's no memorable storylines, nothing that makes the character stand out, or sometimes they're not even likable. They're like Riri Williams' introductory issues, those were trash. She was a complete asshole. Even at like age 6, when she stared down her teacher and was like, you need to tell me that I can't make it because I'm black and I can't be this so that I can have something to fight against, some bigot. I can't just want to do it and do it. I can't let the people who love me encourage me positively if I'm not trying to prove some racist asshole wrong. I just need it. I just have to have it. So yeah, that's what keeps happening, okay? Same with Kamala Khan. Kamala Khan was just, we just have to have a Muslim character because it's time to have a Muslim character. That's why her intro issue is just Muslim American Girl, the book. This is so head ass.
Supergirl, Superboy, Wonder Girl, Kid Flash, Spider-Woman. These are decades-old legacy characters that were made to capitalize on the popularity of their forebears. Yet when Marvel creates Ironheart, Ms. Marvel, or Miles Morales' Spider-Man, the chuds cry and say, why didn't you make a new character? Why do you have to ruin iconic heroes just to push a political agenda or force diversity? They'll say they don't want characters created only to push a political or social or racial agenda. That if the characters were actually good, it wouldn't be such a big deal. But there's a couple of problems with that. Where do they get their secret industry insider intel? How did they get their hands on the super classified Marvel executive file that says, create Black Girl Iron Man for political agenda? They're projecting their bias onto the characters. That's it. They don't want to read about a black girl with armor like Iron Man. They don't even want her to exist.
Look at the screen.
I said look at it!
Who is this? This is Misty fucking Knight, okay? She is a detective, hero character. Her arm is fucking robot arm. To say that people don't want to read about a black girl this or a black girl that implies that we don't already have existing black women as characters who are dangerously successful. Storm is the only name I need to throw out here. She is one of the most iconic X-Men of all time. She's been out since the 70s, and her name is completely synonymous with the X-Men. And she is what? She's black. If you want more black women characters, I have no problem with that at all. I like seeing me a black girl who is a badass, or is very capable, or is heroic, or is whatever. My problem is when they're made solely to be a representation tick box. My problem is when they're written to be unrealistic, unlikable, have the same personality, have the same physical features, but we're supposed to just lap it all up because black woman. And we want to see more black women and shit. So we're supposed to take either some hero's sloppy seconds from a white person, like Riri Williams, instead of building up characters like Vixen, or Misty Knight, or Bumblebee, or Storm. You know how long it's been since we've gotten a good Storm story? Her solo book from 2014 had like 2 good issues, and then it went completely off the rails. We've never gotten a good Storm in the movies either. The closest we got was one of the worst X-Men movies ever. I'm talking about X3. And the rest were completely unremarkable in every way. And then what have we got since then? Her being a racist and Black Panther in the crew. Her also not being herself in this Children of the Atom shit that Vita Ayala's doing now. I would die for a good Storm story. But we don't get one because people are too busy changing the races of other characters, taking legacy characters, and saying, oh, we need some representation, so let's just make another one a black woman. Let's not make any new characters. Let's not build on the ones we have. Just give them a race swap. It's fine. Well, no, it ain't fine. It's dumb. It's head ass.
So they project that she was created only to attack their fragile white dude identities.
Your fragile white identity. Yeah, because it's just the white dudes. It's white dudes. It's not like we have channels like Eric July or Just Some Guy or Jay Longbone or Mecha Random or that Star Wars girl. It's not like half of Clownfish TV is a what? A woman!
Also, their claim that if the character was actually good, blah blah blah, that's their subjective interpretation. There are plenty of people who find a lot of value in these characters.
And guess what? Those people are more than free to like them. They are free to like them, love them, fan them, stand them. But if you look at the sales of a character's book and it has an overall downward trend, that is not their subjective opinion. That is a fact. And if you look at the books of Miss Marvel and Riri Williams and the like, they usually don't do very good. After 2 or 3 issues, interest just goes away. It just goes away. And I think that that's because All New, All Different Marvel was marketed to the absolute wrong people. It's being marketed to people who, by and large, don't support things, at least not financially. They may retweet some art from it and Yas Queen Slay up and down the timeline and talk about how they feel seen. They might even cosplay as a character. But are they going to go buy the book? Are they going to do reviews for the book so that other people can see it and potentially buy it? No. The amount of people who actually put their money and vocal support where their mouth is in this crowd, that number is minuscule. And I know that's the case because they are the direct intended audience for these characters. And the books keep failing because they shoo away their built-in audience because they're quote-unquote toxic trolls and man babies and they're a bunch of incels and her-da-dur-da-dur-da-dur. And the off chance that they do actually read this, guess what? They're pirating it. They're not buying it. So the book is going to fail. So you cannot say that, oh, well, it's just your subjective opinion. Yeah, it's my subjective opinion that 99% of other comic readers agree with.
They're just not made for those dudes. The original characters aren't replaced. Sometimes maybe they're taken out of the story for a few months maximum, and I'll admit I'm not a fan of how Ironheart was kind of shoved into the story out of nowhere while Tony Stark was in a coma. That could have been done better. But any self-respecting comics fan knows that these things are never permanent. Death is not permanent, comas are definitely not permanent. They shake up the status quo, get the readers excited or riled up about whatever, and then they go back to normal.
That is probably the closest thing to an actual point you've made since you started getting into the meat and potatoes of this video. Because of the way Western comics are told, especially from the big two, there's always a reset coming. Whether that's a soft reset with a new issue or event down the line, or whether it's a hard reset like the New 52 or Rebirth or Crisis on Infinite, whatever, a reset is coming. So it's very likely that the latest trash iteration of your favorite character is not going to last very long. The problem, in my opinion, is everybody doesn't have the strength or the legacy power of a Spider-Man or a Wolverine or a Captain America. Some of these characters, they're just screwed. It's going to take decades to fix all the damage done to Captain Marvel. By the time she gets back to being a viable character, there may not be a Marvel comics anymore. That concept bleeds directly into the industry as a whole and the medium as a whole, the genre as a whole. Ain't but so many times someone can read a trash redo or a reskin or a palette swap of their favorite character who then just becomes a mouthpiece for political messages before they just say screw it. Why do you think people are running headlong to anime and manga? Because anime and manga don't do this shit. They don't. They tell their stories sincerely and genuinely. Those creators are allowed maximum creativity, maximum free reign, maximum free speech. They can tell whatever weird ass story, outrageous story, quote unquote politically incorrect story that they want. And they can do it with 10 times the heart and entertainment as your average mainstream Western writer or artist. This is the state we are in. The absolute state of Marvel and DC is because of this. This is not just heard their SJW's bad. And you know what? I'll even keep it 100 with you. I'll keep it 8,000, matter of fact. I'll tell you what, like my name was Hank Goddamn Hill. There are some people on this damn Bird app and this YouTubes who act like everything that comes out of Marvel and DC is just the end of the world. They rely on this current climate of SJWs are ruining everything for mass clicks, mass likes, favorites, retweets, ad revenue, and engagement. They are milking this political attitude dry. And I personally think the teat is starting to run out. But it does not mean that antis or anti-SJWs, whatever you want to call them, chuds, whatever, it doesn't mean that they're all just making shit up. It doesn't mean that they're projecting. Graydon Square once said in his song, Summer's Ending, pipe down, pick up a book right now. Of an opposing view, you might find out everything ain't what you thought it was. There are no others. Everyone's a part of us. If you picked up a book or watched a video or read an article or just freaking talked to someone who actually thought differently than you, which is what you say you did in the beginning of the video, you might actually learn that we aren't that different. This whole sides thing, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be far left versus everyone else. It doesn't have to be SJWs versus antis. It doesn't have to be soy boys versus chuds. We can just be people who are discussing things. Some agree, some don't, but we can all have respect for each other and how we think and how we see the world. But that cannot happen when the assumption is people who think differently than me are wrong automatically. If that is your thought process, then you have already conceded the argument. And much worse, you've already admitted to being unable to deal with opposing sides. There's about 4 minutes left of this video, but I think I've heard enough. I went into this with a relatively open mind. I did hear the opening statement and think, oh, this is about to be some bullshit, but I gave this man a chance. And when he made some alright points, I recognized that. But there was so much insincerity with this video. There's so many assumptions being made. And I just had to do this video. I don't even think this qualifies as fake ass nerd news anymore. It's its own thing. But whatever it was, I hope y'all enjoyed it. Forced adversity, if you happen to see this video, I welcome any discussion or any counter you may have to what I've said. I'm not even going to say you have to be respectful. You can call me everything but a child of God if you want. But when you say whatever you're going to say, if you say anything, I want that shit to be sincere. Do not come at me as herder anti-SJW. Do not come at me and start calling me a grifter or assuming that I'm just saying this stuff for clicks and views and ad revenue. And with that being said, thank y'all for watching and listening. I'm Animane, and I'll talk to y'all later. Deuces.